where the white chicks at? Probably on a farm in Iowa. You know, they little chickens, little chickens. I'll have to tell you that story another time. But I can tell you a story about the first time I remember buying a stick of RAM memory, independent of a computer. I had one of my first computers, a 46 DX266, and I've explained that story before. Had 16 megabytes of RAM installed in it, and I had just moved from Windows 3.11 to Windows 95, so of course I wanted to add another 16 megabytes of RAM, so I'd have 32 megabytes in total. So I bought a PNY 16 megabyte memory stick, a stick of RAM. I bought it at Best Buy in San Antonio, and I remember it costing about $360. But I got a special. If I used my Best Buy card, I didn't have to pay it for 6 months. So I didn't pay it for 6 months. Then all of a sudden I got sacked with like $200 in late fees, and that was a very expensive 16 megabytes of RAM, and I never used the Best Buy card after that. Had an email sent earlier from William, wanted to ask a question about RAM. I recently went on the website, How Stuff Works, and it showed how to install more RAM in my computer. It then directed me to the site Crucial.com to check the RAM that was already in my computer. It advised me that since I'm running Windows XP Home Edition and that I'm running at 32 bits, then I should only upgrade to 3.0 to 3.5 gigabytes. Does this sound right to you? If so, how hard would it be to upgrade to a 64-bit system? Thanks, and sorry about all the questions. Well, William, it's quite alright, but I think you've got a few things confused. Yes, the Windows XP Home Edition is likely a 32-bit version of Windows. That's fine. Now, the real question is how much RAM you currently have installed. Now, it's suggesting you only upgrade to 3 or 3.5 gigabytes of RAM. However, I would say that you probably got only 1 gig of RAM installed in your system, and you'd probably be just as happy just upgrading to 2 gigabytes in total. Anything beyond that, and I'm not sure if you're going to see the performance gains specifically inside of Windows XP Home. And that's, again, with the RAM side of things. Now, if you already have 2 gigabytes of RAM, no, you don't need to upgrade. That's why you got to be careful with a lot of these sites that claim to be optimizing your computer and helping you figure out how stuff works. Even though it directed you to Crucial, and nothing against Crucial, that was probably an advertisement selling you something you may not need. Now, Crucial makes fantastic memory. I've purchased from Crucial in the past, haven't had a problem with them at all. But that being said, don't buy more than you need. And as far as Windows XP Home is concerned, I think you're going to be fine and hitting a ceiling, a limitation, a law of diminishing returns of anything past 2 gigabytes of RAM in total. Now, you asked about how simple it's going to be to upgrade to 64 bits. Don't do it. I'm just telling you, hardcore geeks have had problems migrating from 32-bit Windows to 64-bit Windows. I will not even... I've got 64-bit Windows version of Vista installed on this machine, and you never see me in it. I just don't go into 64 bits because there are different issues involved with a 64-bit operating system with Windows compared to 32 bits. I'm really kind of sad to say, but OS X has handled the transition between 32-bit and 64-bit, and pretty soon 128-bit very elegantly. Microsoft has kind of bungled it the whole way through. And if you don't believe me, do your research. Stick with the 32-bit operating system with Windows XP Home. Don't upgrade to Vista yet. If you have 1 gigabyte, upgrade to 2, but at that point, if you already have 2, don't worry about upgrading at all. And then we would talk about going through about look at our other videos talking about speeding up the startup and shutdown, closing services that you don't need, and you're going to find as much performance gains out of the software side of things as you would by upgrading your hardware and spending money that you may not need to spend. Hope that answers your question, or at least puts a finer point on the questions that you're asking. You're definitely on the right path in thinking about upgrading. Having more RAM has never really been a bad thing, but as I said before, sometimes a little too much isn't always the best idea, especially for your pocketbook. Do you guys have any other suggestions for William? You know, these are just my opinions. I've been known to be wrong in the past, but you know, I've certainly been doing this for quite a long time, as I've clearly established with remembering purchasing 16 megabytes for $360 and thinking that that was an absolute bargain. Whoo! Leave a comment, remark, follow up, whatever. Drop me a line, ask another question, swing by the chat room. We're always there. Live.Pirillo.com.